I am Rubye Kendrick. I am the co-president of the Tyler Smith County League of Women Voters, and we are excited to have you here. I'll let my cohorts introduce themselves, although you probably know most of us already. We have Marilyn Wills, who's also co-president of the League. LaRhonda Hamilton, who you've been in very close contact with in respect to this process. She is our VP of Community Relations and doing an awesome job. And did Dee have to leave?
No, I'm here.
No, she's still
okay. There. All right. Dee Pendleton, who is one of our volunteers and working very closely with us in certainly this process that we have with the Coffee With. And you know that as the League, our mission, again, empowering voters and defending democracy. And we also are involved in a number of other advocacy efforts to, again, keep our community safe, keep them informed. And of course, this is obviously a voting year, and voter registration and voter education is certainly one of the things that our mission front and center, for lack of a better word. And so we are excited about you joining us for this conversation today, and look forward to hearing what you have to say for the community during this very, very, very important time. Thank you.
Okay, well, as you know, have heard, my name is Marilyn Wills, and I'm co-president with Rubye, and we're really excited. We know you both have busy schedules, so we really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. And I get the opportunity to present the first question. And I was thinking about this, and we all have, I think, a generally or a pretty good understanding of how parties function. But I would guess that most people aren't fully aware of what a party chair is supposed to be doing or does. So we thought it would be useful for people to hear from each of you, and we'll do this alphabetically to begin with. So on our answers. So David, can you tell us, first of all, just a little bit of background about yourself, and then tell us about your role as the party chair?
Sure. So just background wise, been here in Tyler for 27 years. My previous life, I was in the medical device industry, and an opportunity came that moved us out here. Kids were all young at that point. And so really they've all grown up here in Tyler. Primarily a business background. I was a county commissioner back in 05 and 06, and it always stayed involved in the political process. It was one of those things that you grow up hearing about, but it came to a point where really in my mid 40s that I just wanted to do something that was going to make a difference. I know that sounds cliche-ish, but that's really what just gets people involved. Sometimes people are annoyed at one issue or another, and that gets them involved. For me, it really was just overarching was the whole process of everything. So, quick background, family, 3 daughters. My wife, Stella, we've been married, getting close to 36 years now. Heavily involved in the community, not just politically, but United Way. I've been on the board and board chair there now for almost 20 years, and a member of the Chamber of Commerce, serve on the boards there as well. And just love Tyler. Love it, love it, love it.
Good. Tell us about your role as the party chair.
So I'll tell you what I'll do is I'll try to cover a few of the points because I think Michael and I are going to have some similar answers as the roles are the same. But most people, what they know is what they see, which is us doing an interview on TV and answering some questions. But really the elections is the enormous part of it. The old days, county chairs ran the elections themselves. And so now we're fortunate to have a county that really has a great process in place that we can contract with, but really running the elections, being part of the election board, making sure that all elections, primary, general, municipal, operate well, are staffed properly. We recruit volunteers to be at the polls, to do the election workers, election clerks, election judges. We also run our conventions. A lot of folks don't realize that we put together the precinct conventions, the county conventions, and then also leading up to the state and the general convention. So I'll go ahead and stop there because again, Michael's going to have some similar things, but let him finish off in that area.
Okay, thank you. Well, Michael, tell us about you.
All right. I was born and raised in Kansas City, Missouri, actually, but my family has deep roots here in East Texas. We have land that's been in the family for over 100 years, and that was a big part of me coming back to Tyler. I spent summers here for, when I was younger, came here for family reunions, and I moved here full-time in '99. I've been here ever since. I've always been involved, as a voter in the political process and saw the importance. In 2007, 2008, I really got a chance to experience the impact that representation has on our lives. And that's when I got more involved. Let's see, I became chair in 2016, right after the presidential election. And now more than ever, I think we see the impact that representation has on our lives. We don't make a lot of the decisions individually. We don't vote on a lot of the daily things that happen in government. We elect representatives to do those things for us. So that is the number one goal for us, making sure that we have good representation that will focus on realizing those ideals articulated in the Declaration of Independence, building a country where everyone has an opportunity to live up to their fullest potential. As I have a 15-year-old child, got a girlfriend looking to get married here within the next year or so.
Outstanding.
So the stakes are as high as ever. As far as being county chair, again, the focus is on electing good representation. One of the things that I think we're seeing now is that I think may have been Hamilton, one of the forefathers that said that one of the biggest threats to our nation is when people start to put their own selfish interests before that of our nation. So again, right now more than ever, we need representatives that are going to truly put the best interests of the people ahead of everything.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you for those answers. LaRhonda, you're next.
Okay, so my question is, many people may not have a good understanding about how primary elections function. Can you give us a short explanation about the purpose and the importance in our election system? And Michael, you can go first.
Okay, just a quick summary of the timeline. Back in November was the filing deadline in November of 2021 for the 22 primary election. Each of the major parties, the Democratic and Republican Party, have primary elections. Some of the smaller parties like Green, Libertarian, they do conventions to elect their nominees. So the primaries are where the two major parties vote for their nominees to be on the ballot in the general election. So we had the filing period in November of 2021 for the 22 primary election, which is coming up on March 1st. There are, just like there are people that only vote in the presidential elections, every 4 years, There are people that only vote in the general elections in November. But if the candidate that you think is the best is not your nominee in the general election, you know, you may not be as happy with the results. So it's important that every person get it. Number one, get informed so that you can make a knowledgeable, informed decision. But participate, take personal responsibility for the success of our democracy.
David?
So, yeah, to piggyback on that, you know, a lot of folks, and you're going to hear a similar theme from me, and that is local, local, local. So a lot of folks do not vote in the primary election because they think, what does one vote matter? What difference does it make? And, you know, one vote out of, when you're looking at a statewide vote, which, you know, we've got, and I don't know the exact number of registered voters, 29 million. We may have cracked the 30 million barrier in Texas now, but if you just say we've got 16, 17 million registered voters, one vote out of 16 or 17 million is a much smaller percentage than one out of 145,000 in Smith County. And so people don't realize the importance of that on the local elections. I was always interested in people who didn't vote until the general because they felt, well, that's the one that really matters. But to me, I didn't want somebody else choosing my candidate. So I always wanted to be involved in that part of the process. And let's pick the team that we want on the field. You know, it's like, to use a sports analogy, it's like participating in a football draft, but letting somebody else make your picks. And so I want to make sure that we get the team out there that is going to best represent. What was a little different this year was because of the redistricting. The filing period was a lot shorter. Usually it opens up in September. And so you're going to have a 2.5, close to 3 month filing period. This time it was a month. And even at that, the precinct chairs are split out of that. So there's 2 different precinct chair filings. And normally the precinct chairs would get voted on during the primary election, but they're pushed back till the runoff election on May the 24th. So that's going to be really interesting because very few people vote in those runoffs, much less than in a primary.
And I think one of the things that the league recognizes, and probably both of you do also, is that most people just don't understand the system. We think we understand elections and the process and everything, but it's actually there's a lot of pieces for people to get and to understand the importance of each one of those. So it occurs to me that we probably need to do a lot more work on that end of it to help people process the whole thing.
Well, it's the age-old issue.
Yeah.
You know, we communicate and communicate. I mean, I remember when I was with the county years ago when we had a bond election that was up. And I remember somebody saying after it, well, why didn't you guys publicize this? We wish we knew about this issue a little more. And I thought, my goodness, I mean, we've been beating our brains out for the last 3 months getting this information out. And so it's the mechanisms of communication. People's attentions are pulled in so many different directions. You're really, using the grocery store analogy, you're competing for shelf space in people's minds.
Yeah.
I think that touches on a point. People that understand, that have that personal connection with how voting affects their lives, they'll seek out the information. Those folks that just don't make that connection, those are the folks that we have to go knock on their door, send them a text, call them on the phone, send them mail. So again, it's back to that, making the connection between the whole political process and our everyday lives.
Yeah, you're right. Dee, I think you're up.
I am up next. So my question would be, what would you recommend new voters do before going to the polls for the first time? And we're going to keep the pattern going, and we'll start with David this time.
Well, the first thing is make sure they're properly registered. You know, there are times where people come to the polls, and if they're new in the area, or they haven't updated an address, you know, all of those things. So, you know, just take care of that at first. They really, the best thing to do, in my mind, is for anybody wanting information is come to the county party first, whether it's the county chair, whether it's the county party through a website or a Facebook page, and just asking for information, because we're going to be the conduits of information, what's happening, when it's happening. You know, we've done a number of meet the candidate nights, and it really has been received well by the people that have come. To think about, you have the ability as a citizen who doesn't really know anybody to come to one location and meet 15, 20, 25 different candidates and elected officials in one place, and get a chance to have one-on-one conversations. Because as much as we can publicize what's out there, the reality is that websites, Facebook pages, they're good for general information, but I really want to watch somebody talk. I don't just want to hear the words they're saying, but I want to see how that they're saying it. I want to see, are you really genuine? Are you sincere? Or are you just reading a script from somewhere else?
All right.
Michael? Mhm.
You know, as I look at this panel, I see I'm a Generation X person. I don't see many that might qualify as Zs or millennials on here. You know, these people, these young folks growing up now, they live in a period where they have access to more information than ever before. There is absolutely no excuse for being misinformed, for proceeding with ignorance. So, number one, I would say get informed. Okay. Now, as we've seen here recently with concepts such as alternative facts, you know, we got to have critical thinking skills. You know, if you can't distinguish between a satirical website and legitimate journalism, you're going to have a hard time distinguishing between truth and lies. So number one, we got to make sure that we have a population that knows how to think critically, you know. So I'm going to differ a little bit here. You know, I would ask a person to go to an unbiased source for information. I would send them to, I have sent people to the League of Women Voters website to look at their political guide, because I want them to get the information first. If they have questions, come back and talk to me. I'll break it down. I'll explain it. Yeah, I may do some persuasion, but I want you to make an informed decision. I don't want you to act on fear. I don't want you to act off of misinformation. I think the first thing that a voter needs is good critical thinking skills. Go find factual information, make informed decisions, determine what your values are, and think about what's important, whether it's your family, your community, our nation, you know, humanity. Make good decisions based on your values.
Michael, how do you really, you know, I hear what you're saying, but in any walk of life that we're in, whether it's our churches, whether it's our communities, whether it's a political issue or anything, getting the people informed is the challenge everywhere. You know, we both have a number of seniors in our political groups where they're not Facebook people. They're not website people. And so many folks have depended upon the newspaper for so many years, but that's not the main source of media anymore. It's slow, it's limited. And so it's, you know, it's just like when we talk about our church life, the message shouldn't change. but the method does. How we get that information out. And so many folks, we're all predisposed in certain areas. We've got certain filters that we look at information, and we all wish it was not that way. We all wish that people could be much more open, but you go back to the old days of news, you really couldn't tell if there was a slant on one news source or the other. And to one person, I can look at news source X and say, oh, they're the ones telling the truth. And then I can look at news source Y and say, nah, they're all wet. They don't know what they're talking about. I tend to prefer our local news. It's much more community minded. I have stopped listening to cable news and network news for a long time now. And I think my sanity thanks me.
Okay, let me address that. You talk about the old days of news. You think back to when the primary sources were the major networks, and the barrier to entry to reach that broad of an audience was pretty high. So there was some journalism involved. And you think, when did things start to fall apart? Well, cable did have a lot to do with that, because they're more interested in reaching segments of the market. And right now, I mean, I'm sure there are companies that bill themselves as news that have defended themselves in court because they say, no, we're not news, we're entertainment. So that's part of the issue, is that the media has changed. Before, there used to be what they call the fairness doctrine. There was a requirement that sources of news or journalism provide the opportunity to hear both sides of a controversial issue. That's been eliminated now.
Right.
But it seems like now, between cable, talk radio, internet, people are getting more targeted, narrow, filtered information. So I think it goes back to that. We've got to learn how to think critical. We've got to seek out our own sources of information. We've got to take personal responsibility for being informed, not just entertained.
There was finished reading a biography on Walter Cronkite. I think it was one I picked up at one of the book sales for about, $2 or $3, but it was fascinating, not just listening to his story, but him commenting on how journalism had evolved over the years. And he signed off, and I think this was written late 80s, early 90s, but it probably was 3 or 4 years before he passed away. And he said, my greatest fear is that the news media is becoming more about people's opinions than it is about reporting events. Mm-hmm. And those of us, and by the way, I did feel discriminated against, Michael. You left out the baby boomers earlier in your analysis. So.
I didn't want to do any ageism. I assumed everybody was
older.
Yeah,
I'll proudly wear it. It's okay. But it really it just is that you want to be trusting, but we've all become so guarded in all that. And I think the only way that you learn to trust one another is through common and shared experience. I think that helps in order to do that. And back then, you think about the news media that we knew, we knew who those people were. Not that we knew them personally, but we felt like they were part of the family, and that's the way it was presented. Mm-hmm. Now, you don't know. It changes so much, and different folks. So anyway, that's probably a topic for another session.
Right. That's a long one.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, it's my time now. I'm glad to hear that you are referring people to the League of Women Voters website, because the next question is related to that. So the League of Women Voters offer vote411.org. This is a website that offers candidates the opportunity to submit answers to nonpartisan questions about the positions that they are seeking, and also provide some biographical information. Would you encourage the candidates in your party to participate in order to provide a platform for them to help the community understand who they are and what they support? So I believe, Michael, it's your turn to go first. And we have 2 more questions after this.
So yes, it appears that I got ahead of the question on that, but absolutely. I think, again, that for information, it's best to go to a unbiased source. So first you get the information, then you apply the information to your values. So I would highly encourage all of our candidates to respond to the questions, take it seriously, and direct their constituents to the League for information.
Thank you. David?
So well, I hate to give you a half and half answer. I think
Okay.
I think there's more value in this at the time of the general election. I think that at this point, it really is more of the duty of each individual party to pick the candidates that they want to present for the general ballot, because really, if you're competing inside a party election, it is non-biased within the party. There are going to be differences in policies between Democratic and Republican and other parties, but our roles, that's why we are asked to remain impartial in one candidate or another, and not to actively campaign. So, I mean, I would submit that I think for now, that in a primary, let the party do its job. Let the party be that conduit for information, because the differences they will sort out that way. And then you have much more value, I think, as a non-biased source between Democrat, Republican, independent, et cetera, when it comes terms to the general election, because the questions that a Republican might ask in a primary may be different from what a Democrat may ask in the primary. So, but again, when it comes to the general, any type of sourcing, any type of information is great. I think we would need to come to some kind of agreement on what questions were asked, so that they could be, so both parties would feel, yes, this is a non-biased question in my mind, because I think that would give credibility to the information as a source.
Okay. Well, thank you for that perspective.
Okay, I think I'm up next. Voters can be exhausted by all the information around an election. What do you recommend a voter do if they're overwhelmed by the noise? David, we're going to start with you.
Well, I wish I knew the answer to that question, because I'd give that advice to myself. You know, Michael said something earlier, which was smart, and that is, go talk to somebody that you believe can be objective and that you trust, that will help guide you. I mean, the reality is that you're going to depend on somebody else's opinion some way, somehow in this process. You've got to make up your own mind. But if I go to LaRhonda and I say, what do you think about this? And she's going to give me her opinion, and then I either agree with that or disagree with that. If I agree with her, I'm really following her opinion. If I disagree with it, I may be following somebody else's opinion. But try to get numerous sources. I would say try to find things that are really, really important with you, and to separate all the noise out. If topic A, B, and C are what really are most important to me, get with those candidates one-on-one and try to get answers to those 3 questions, and then get the rest of the noise out of the way and just focus on a couple main points.
Michael?
You know, I think one of the issues that we have, they say that Texas has one of the lowest voter turnouts in the nation. And that I don't think is good. What does that say about our state if our people don't care enough to exercise that precious right that we have? So to that, I would say, understand how when we don't participate, there's a saying about being ruled by your inferiors if you don't vote. Again, it goes back to, we got to make that connection between how policy, how politics, how public affairs affects our daily lives. And, for most people, they get involved when there's an issue that affects them. So I would say that there are some people that, that's part of their strategy. They want to suppress involvement by overwhelming people. We got to be like Muhammad Ali and the rope-a-dope. You can't give up. You got to endure it and have a strategy to see the big picture. So just stay focused and positive and understand how important it is.
Yeah.
Thank you both for that.
I think Dee has the
Dee?
last question.
I do. So what does your organization do to encourage voter registration? And I believe we're starting this time with David on that one.
Yeah, well, I'll be the first to say not enough. It really is. It's that one-on-one. I mean, it's the feet on the street. I think as any organization would attest, volunteers are not plentiful, no matter what whether it's in my chamber work or whether it's in my nonprofit work, the similar thing is that, you go out and we go out to different events. One is you need to get people within your parties to be a deputy voter registrar and to be able to allow people the privilege of voting. A lot of folks don't know that that's not party specific. So if I happen to be out somewhere with a voter registration booth and somebody who's Democrat wants to come up and do that, of course they can. I mean, by law, I'm obligated to do that, but that's part of the process. If I believe in the process, then I'm going to participate in it in that particular way. But it's getting out on the street, it's knocking on doors, it's phone banking, it's looking at new voter lists or a new movers list, anything and everything. Finding the people that are not registered to vote and finding out why. We had in the last presidential election, we had Smith County was about 3.5 points higher than the state average, but it still was under 70%. But yet there were more people that voted than ever had. So it's kind of that catch-22 that the numbers are rising, but so is the population.
The right to vote is one of the rights enumerated in the Bill of Rights. So we think that it's something that should be unencumbered, whether it's the First Amendment, the Second Amendment. We believe that we should do everything possible to make voting accessible so that everyone can participate, remove barriers. One of those things would be online voter registration. Who here hasn't interacted with the state to get a license or something where you had to do it online? Whether it's driver's license, any other kind of license, you go online to take care of business. Well, for whatever reason, the state of Texas feels like that fundamental right is not something that we should be able to initiate online. When it comes to confirming a person's ID, when they show up for voting, they're going to have to present a government issued ID to verify that they are the person. So that would be one thing that would encourage voter registration, making it easier. So as far as encouraging people to register to vote, you know, we want to remove barriers, and we want to inform people, help them make that connection between voting and their everyday lives.
But Michael, I would suggest that you could renew your driver's license online, but you can't get a brand new license online.
Well, what I'm saying is that you can get a handgun license online. So, you
Well,
know, the state is doing things to make certain rights easier, yet when it comes to voting, the state is doing things to make it more difficult. So I'm going to say be consistent. If you want to make things easier, do it everywhere for issues that are important.
And that's one of those issues that could be a full session, you know.
Right. Well, it's the who and the how. When you talk about voting, you know, who is eligible to vote, you know, and we do make those decisions. We make those decisions by age. You know, if a person has committed certain types of crimes, do they lose their right to vote in an election? Those are things that people decide. You know, each party has had a long history of accusing the other of misinformation. I don't think anybody's got a monopoly on that. But it really is that you want, I mean, I want everybody to have access to vote, but I do want people voting who are legally eligible to vote. I want to know who they are. And, you know, one person, one vote. You know, that's one of the reasons that early voting hours expanded. You know, when we heard last time about the whole I had somebody come up to me, well, I can't vote 24 hours a day in Smith County anymore. I said, you never could. You know, and what a lot of people don't realize when you talk about just the expansion of voter hours, the logistics, and this is what comes back on Michael and I, is that I'd love to be able to staff 24-hour voting here. You know, now with the legislature, that's not part of the process, but listen, getting volunteers just to staff during normal business hours is not easy. And so finding a way to staff a voting district in you know, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning. Anyway, there's logistics of once somebody says, yes, I want to do this, then what has to happen in the background to make that happen?
Okay, well, we're actually over time, and I really think we've had a great conversation. So we appreciate, again, thank you both for joining us. This is actually a first for the League of Women Voters here in Tyler Smith County to have the party chairs join us for a discussion. And so we're really appreciative that you have done this. And I think we had a great discussion. So any last words from either one of you?
I would just say that the stakes are as high as ever. You know, if we look at what's going on in our nation, it's important because, you know, they say when kids are like under 5 years old, it's easier for them to learn because they have less of a filter. I think that we need to get an important lesson from that and make sure that we are valuing honesty and truth.
David, any last words?
I appreciate the opportunity to be here. You know, Michael and I have very different political differences, probably a lot closer social opinions than one would realize. We all want the same things for our families. You know, we want opportunity, we want future, we want safe communities, we want education. You know, all of those things. We desire that for each other. We all want a better world. And look, these problems are not new. I can't tell you how many times where when I hear about what's going on, I think back to the 60s. It's so similar. And, you know, I always find people say, well, no, it's not similar. And I was there for both. I mean, I remember all those things. You look back to so much of the music back then and the things that the music was saying, and we are continuing to tear each other up. We find ways to create a difference between one another, and all that it does is tear down. I just, full disclosure, I've had a chance to get to know LaRhonda a little bit and ask questions, and to be able to say, I'm going to ask you a question that is out of ignorance. And ignorance doesn't mean I'm an ignorant person. Ignorance is without knowledge of the subject. And to allow us to ask questions of one another without getting offended.
Mhm.
You know, you asked because of this. I think the recent things that have gone on with Whoopi Goldberg in the news, I think it's a great opportunity for conversation, not for attack, you know, not for destruction of any one or multiple individuals, but let's talk about it. You know, what does that mean? What are the ramifications? So I look forward to more conversations. I look forward to opportunities for Tyler, for Smith County. And I appreciate you guys having me on.
Okay. Again,
Thank you.
thanks to both of you.
And sorry, guys is a New York thing. I don't apologize. We just say you guys to everybody. So, ladies, forgive me.
Forgiven.
We just say y'all.
All y'all.
Y'all,
All y'all,
yes.
right?
All right. Thank you both.
All right.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
David and Michael.
All
Have a
right.
good evening.
Been
Thank you,
awesome.
guys.